Hello, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America, featuring today's top directors sharing behind-the-scenes stories of their latest films and insights into the craft of directing. Please take a second to subscribe to our podcasts on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. This episode takes us behind the scenes of director Rob Reiner's new historical drama, Shock and Awe. Based on a true story, the film takes us back to the time after 9/11, when the Bush-Cheney administration claimed that then-president of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, had weapons of mass destruction during their push to ramp up support for the invasion of Iraq. However, journalists at the Knight Ridder news agency were skeptical of the evidence and stayed in pursuit of the real story, while their colleagues mistakenly fed the American people news based on faulty and fabricated intelligence. In addition to Shock and Awe, Mr. Reiner's directorial credits also include the feature films This Is Spinal Tap, The Princess Bride, Misery, Ghosts of Mississippi, Being Charlie, and LBJ, and the movies for television Sonny Boy, Likely Stories Volume 1, and Everyday Life. He is a 3-time nominee for the DGA Award for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Feature Film for Stand By Me, When Harry Met Sally, and A Few Good Men. Following a recent screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Mr. Reiner spoke with director Jeremy Kagan about filming Shock and Awe. During their discussion, Mr. Reiner talks about why shooting in Washington, D.C. is so difficult, why he cast himself in the film, and his fervent appreciation for unsweaty acting.
Take that one. Okay.
How are you guys doing? Good. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
So the first question I have for you is, what do you use for your news sources at this very moment in your life? What do you use?
In my life, I have a lot of sources, and I think in order for you to weed through the mess out there, you got to pick a number of sources. I look at the Wall Street Journal, I look at the New York Times, and I look at Washington Post, and I look at all the networks, even Fox. I look at Fox just to see what the enemy's doing. And it's interesting because there are some good journalists at Fox, Shepard Smith and Brett Baer and Wallace, Chris Wallace, but it's the opinion people that are made it really difficult.
Do you use also, just in terms of your phones and mobiles, are you looking at any other sources if you're suddenly looking at your social?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter all the time, and I look at, there's a number of journalists that I check out, specific journalists that I look at. But, I get New York Times and Washington Post and Wall Street Journal. They feed in whatever I see. Yeah.
Got it. And have you moved to some of the more, let's say, less known, like TPM or not?
Well,
The Guardian.
I look with The Guardian, but I also look at Axios, and I look at Politico, and I look at The Hill, which is, from Capitol Hill, and which is pretty down the middle, and, Axios is good, actually, pretty good, yeah.
Having made this movie and seeing the nature of the Fourth Estate at this very moment, today, what's your feelings?
Well, it's scary right now. I mean, it's not just scary from the point of view of being able to push the truth out, because we're in a very strange time in this country where, we all know that the press is under attack. It's been called the enemy of the people and fake news and all that, but their physical well-being is now at stake, because you see what happens at these rallies and these QAnon people and Trump, just rousing these people to commit, basically violence. And we're in this strange time in this country where we're no longer talking about what the best way to deliver health care or education or work on the environment or taxes or jobs or whatever. We're in a major pitched battle for the truth, just arguing about what's true and what's not true. And there's the classic authoritarian fascist playbook is to, and this is something that I started, we launched this site, the Committee to Investigate Russia, and I called upon all of these people who have, tons and tons of experience in the intelligence world, and, talking with John Brennan and James Clapper and Michael Hayden, John Cipher, Mike Morrell, all these guys. They explained to me how, they didn't tell me they're not allowed to tell you classified information, but they did tell me how active measures work, because it's very confusing. And this is something the Russians have been doing for a long, long time, even, before the Cold War. Even after even before the Berlin Wall fell. And we've done it too in America. It's a thing called disinformation, where you try to get people to think a certain way, but what they explained to me is that it's not even so much to get you to believe one thing or another. What they try to do is confuse you to the point where you don't know what's true and what's not true. And so it's raising all that confusion that allows an authoritarian to come forward and say, don't worry about it. I alone can fix it, essentially.
Here's the line
and that's what they explained to me, and that's what we're dealing with right now, because he has been very successful. Trump has been very, very successful at cementing that 35, 40%, whatever it is, to where they will believe anything he tells them. He even has actually said the sentence, "Don't believe what you see and hear."
Exactly.
He's actually said that
this
sentence.
This is George Orwell's.
Yeah.
This is right here. But you have a line in here which is, "This is what they do. They lie." And she's actually talking about government.
Yeah.
And here's the question that sort of underlies even this movie. What's the lie for?
Well, the lie in the case of shock and awe, and by the way, every administration lies. Republicans, Democrats, they all lie. They lie. Let's not say it a lie. They use propaganda to sell a policy or to sell a rationale for going to war. In this case, they were making the rationale. They had this idea of going into Iraq long before 9/11. It was part of this project for the New American Century, which was written by these neocons for the American Enterprise Institute. The idea was to put a Western-style democracy in the Middle East, another one to proliferate and help Israel and so on. So you have to sell that. And, if you remember when Andy Card, who was George W. Bush's chief of staff, went on Meet the Press, he said, you don't trot out a new product in August. And what he was saying was, when people come back from their vacations, you're going to see the main selling tools. And they sold Osama bin Laden was responsible for 9/11. They sold that there were weapons of mass destruction that were going to get in the hands of terrorists. This idea about aluminum tubes being used to enrich uranium. All that stuff was put out there as a way to go to Iraq, and that was the rationale for it, and that was the propaganda. Now, it's not about a specific policy anymore. Like I say, we're not debating policies, what's good or bad. This is about authoritarianism versus democracy. And the Russians have been trying to undermine the idea of democracy, not just in America, but around the world, and they've been doing it for years. What they figured out, and we bankrupted them, they had to collapse and fold the tent because they spent themselves into oblivion trying to keep up with us in the nuclear arms race, and they collapsed. And the Berlin Wall came down, and all of a sudden, this guy, Putin, who was a KGB guy, he takes over the country, and Mother Russia, he doesn't like the fact that they've lost the Soviet Union and they've lost all these countries. And he figures out, because he's way smarter than Donald Trump. Of course, everybody's smarter than him, but that's not a tough one. But he figured out that there's a way of using the internet and as a weapon, and that's what he did, and that's what's happened. And if people don't understand. I've been trying to explain this to people for a long, long time, because when we first saw this intrusion into our election, I try to explain to people that this is an act of war. And if we had seen, a building get knocked down, everybody knows what that is. Or you see bombs dropping in Pearl Harbor, you know what that is. It's an act of war. This is the same thing, but it's much more insidious, and you don't see it. But the capacity for what it can do is way greater than buildings getting knocked down or bombs dropping, because what you can do is, and they're already in there now, they're in there, our electrical systems and everything. And the question is, who's gonna up the ante here? It's one thing to dabble in people's elections and toy with democracy, but then you can also physically shut down power grids, and you can actually blow stuff up. People don't understand about that. You can actually blow things up, and we did it. America did it with the help of the Israelis, and we blew up centrifuges in Iraq. In Iran. It was called Stuxnet.
What would you be recommending to anyone you're now talking to in terms of the actions, not just being witnesses to this, but to being, in fact, active?
Yeah.
What would you recommend this group of people who just saw your movie?
The thing that you talk to. The only thing that can be done is, right now, the press is under attack and it's being eroded. We have no more checks and balances because the Republicans, for whatever reason, have chosen party or their elected offices over country. But we still have, the courts are still holding right now, and we still have the vote. And this is the first time in my lifetime, and I'm 71, I've been through 17 or 18, whatever it is, presidential elections.
You've been through a place where you can look at actually George Bush, and he suddenly sounds reasonable compared to our time.
Well, he was a nice person, at least. I mean, he wasn't. His policies were disastrous, and it caused many lives and trillions of dollars and all that. So. Right now.
But again, going to
Trump.
What we
okay,
can
I'm
do.
going to get to it, because Trump has not done anything yet that is on that level. But if we don't take back the House this time, and this is the first time, because you always hear this, and I've tweeted this out, you always hear that, whenever you get to a presidential election, they say it's the most important election in our lifetime. You hear that all the time. They're all important. But this is the first time a midterm election is probably more important than any presidential election, because if the Democrats cannot take back the House, and by the way, you've got really dedicated Republicans working very hard to try to get the House for the Democrats. They're not in elected office, but the Steve Schmitz and the David Frums and the William Crystals and the George Wills and all those people, they're really trying hard, because they realize this is not about party anymore. This is about whether or not the democracy survives. So there is a way, and that is to flip the House, which then will put in the hands of Democrats subpoena power that can start holding this president accountable, which we can get, certain information. We can have hearings actually in public and have things come out.
Here we're in California, and the odds
and California,
are the House
no, California, there are districts, and you can look up and see which districts. There's some down in Orange County. There's some up in Northern California. You take a look at the districts that are in play. And if you want to do anything, I would say get people to register, get them to the polls, because we're going to have to win by a lot. We won, by 3 million votes last time. Wasn't enough, because we're facing gerrymandering, which is there. We're also facing voter suppression and the help of the Russians for the other side. So we're going to have to come out in droves to the point where it's so overwhelming that they won't be able to say, they won't be able to tamper with it. And you have to understand how this works. If you can get inside electrical grids and mess with that, you can get inside the electoral system. You don't even have to get into the voter machines, because, to flip votes, when everybody thinks they tap into the voter machines, it's too hard to do that because there's too many machines. But every machine is linked to a county where the votes are then sent to the county for tabulation. And those things can be hacked into, and those things can be dealt with. And also voter rolls can be, you show up at the polls and your name's not there, even though you've registered. So those kind of things happen. But if you get there in such droves, it will overcome a lot of that stuff. And then you flip the House, and then Mueller comes with his, with his report, and he's going to come.
You're suggesting then that we all then take an active role in making sure not only that
if you want democracy to survive, you have to, because democracy's 242 years old right now, and we were talking about this earlier. The sweet spot of any great civilization is 250 to 300 years, and there's no guarantee that democracy is going to survive forever. It may, it may not. I think it will. I think good people of goodwill will do the right thing ultimately, but
it requires
doing it, and it also, democracies are under attack. Brexit was the same kind of thing, where the Russians played there, they're playing in Italy, they're playing in Germany, they tried to flip an election in France. They're trying to do all that. So right now, it's like in World War I, they said, make the world safe for democracy, We're fighting now, right now. We're in a pitched battle for democracy, but it's happening in cyberspace, and it's happening.
Well, clearly you made this movie to excite us once more into the potential not only of knowing about this and reminding us, but also to hopefully activate us in terms of doing something.
Right.
Choices you made. I know you thought about this movie back in 2003. And I know you went through sort of like, well, maybe we should do a kind of a Dr. Strangelove version.
Yeah, I didn't really figure out how to do this. It was just weird. I mean, I was like, I don't know how many people are my age around it, but, I was of draft age, during the Vietnam War. And I just couldn't believe in my lifetime that we were going to go to war twice based on lies. And I said, well, how is this possible, And I felt like a parent watching their kid run into the street and feeling helpless to see your child get hit by the truck. And that's what I felt like. And I said, I've got to do a movie of something to talk about what's happening here. And I thought, well, maybe I'll make it like a satire, like you say, like a Dr. Strangelove or something. I worked with Larry Gelbart on it, and I couldn't get a script that I liked. And then I tried it as a drama, and I couldn't get that to work. And then I saw this documentary by Bill Moyers, who we quote at the beginning of the film. He was LBJ's press secretary, talking about the importance of a free and independent press in order to maintain a democracy. And he interviewed these 4 journalists, and I didn't even know about these guys. I mean, they arrived at the same conclusions I arrived at. If you did your due diligence and you read what you needed to read, you'd know that there was no connection between Al Qaeda and Saddam Hussein. You'd know that there was no definite weapons of mass destruction, all that stuff. And so I said, well, this is the way in. Here's these guys.
But then you also have the boy. So
that was another documentary. I saw another documentary of a young guy. This was a true story about a guy who was of a military family, and everybody had served in his family. And when 9/11 happened, he signed up. He wanted to go, and they sent him to Afghanistan. And at a certain point, all of a sudden he's being shipped to Iraq, and he didn't understand why. Because they hadn't caught bin Laden, they hadn't yet really totally disrupted Al Qaeda, and he didn't quite know why he was going to Iraq, but he was literally there for less than a week, and his transport hit an IED, and he lost the use of his legs. So the idea is to show cause and effect and say, if we don't hold people accountable, and that's the line that the character I play, John Walcott, says, when the government says something, you only have one question to ask: is it true?
And what made you decide to cast yourself?
Oh, that's the craziest story. I mean, it's ridiculous. Alec Baldwin was supposed to play that part, and we had cast him, and we actually rearranged the whole schedule for him so that he could leave on Fridays to go to New York, so he could do Saturday Night Live to do Trump. And we had been shooting for a week. And
already been shooting?
Yeah, we've been shooting for a whole week with Woody Harrelson and Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Marsden. And on a Saturday, Alec was going to come on for Monday, and he's supposed to show up on Saturday and then get his costumes and all that. And we get a call on Saturday from his agent saying he's not going to come. He's decided he's dropping out. He's not doing this. I said, well, are you crazy? What am I, now I'm like a maniac. I'm trying to figure, who do I...
Remind me of Rob Reiner, who once told me when I was asking, and an actor fell out on Friday, and we were shooting on Monday, and I talked to this guy, Rob Reiner, and Rob Reiner said to me, don't worry, when the camera runs on Monday, somebody will be in front of it.
That's right. That's what I always said. When you roll the camera, somebody will be standing there. Who it is. So my wife, Michelle, who's one of the producers on the film, she says to me, well, why don't you do it? And I thought, oh, no, I don't know. I don't like acting and directing. It's that split focus. I said, but I'm available. So I figured, what the hell? And I work cheap. And so I decided to do it. And then I'm playing this guy, John Walcott, and she says to me, try to be less Jewish. And I said, all right, I'll try. But that's the reason I'm doing it, just because it was like, necessity.
So how did you set up yourself in this sense? Were you already using playback on the shoot, or
we were using playback, but I still hate it because you do a take and then you got to run and see, and it's just not the good. And plus, I got to look at myself. I don't like that. While I'm working and all this stuff, it was not the only good thing was that I didn't have time to. I had to take Alec Baldwin's suits and clothes because we didn't have time to get, and I had to, alter it and change it, and his waist was way bigger than mine. So that, I like that part. He was much fatter than me. So I like that.
You have, in this, there are a number of scenes where your character actually says, if anything, what is the most important thing to be heard and said.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering when you were doing those scenes.
Well, the scene with that long speech in the newsroom after they've just watched Meet the Press and they're starting to doubt their reporting. There's a speech that John Walcott gets, and apparently that is. By the way, all the journalists were there with us. They were on set. They worked with us on the script. They were very active and very involved in everything. And John Landay comes up to me and says, John Walcott gave this speech to us, and, you should put it in, because we had a couple of lines in there. He says, but it's a great speech. He talked about, and all the lines that you see in there about, we don't write for people who send other people's kids to war. We write for people whose kids get sent to war. All that stuff was stuff that John Walcott had said.
It's not in your script.
Not in the script. And we wrote it all down, and I quickly tried to memorize it, and then we just did it.
Now, you shot this in a very short time, which is,
yeah.
And you deserve the applause.
Yeah,
here,
26
amazing.
days. Yeah, we shot.
In terms of casting, I want to deal with, besides casting yourself, the boy. How did you find him? Because I assume with the others you made.
Yeah, I asked Woody, because I had worked with Woody Harrelson on LBJ, so I had a good situation with him, and we really liked working with you. So I asked him. And then I got the other people, if there's a script that is worth something, it's got some, they want to do it. They just want to be part of it. But I auditioned, the kids, the young guy, and this guy, Luke Tenney, who plays, the young soldier, Adam, it was the first audition he'd ever been on. He'd never done anything, and he just came in and auditioned. I said, great. It was his first audition. Now he's got a little part in a series. He's doing stuff.
By the way, in that audition, what did he do in your process? I mean, do you have them read? Do you read with them? Do you do improv?
Well,
what do you do?
I read, because he has that long speech at the beginning. Yeah. And people who are, haven't done a lot, they want to hit it out of the park. He memorized it. He knew it. And one of the casting directors, read Jane Jenkins, who I work with a lot, and she read with him. And I usually look for somebody, I don't want to see any acting. If there's no acting there, and then that's to me, what I call unsweaty acting. It's just there. Like Richard Jenkins to me is like a great unsweaty actor. Morgan Freeman's another unsweaty one, where he's just talking, and it's just there, there's no acting and stuff. And he was like that.
And did you know it right then and there?
Yeah.
And did you say to him?
I didn't say to him right then and there because, and this is something that Jane Jenkins always tells me, because there's other people coming in, you know, and so you don't want to say because then there's other people, and so I usually say, okay, you got, but then she said, wait, there's others, you know. The only time I did that was with Kathy Bates, you know, when I did Misery. I had seen her on stage like 3 or 4 times, and she's a great actress. And Bill Goldman, who wrote the screenplay, he said, "What about Kathy Bates? You know, to play Annie Wilkes?" And I said, "Well, she's great. I mean, but you know, she had never done film, you know, really that much. She's done little things." So I had her come in, and we sat down and we started to read. And I'm not exaggerating. She read like 1 line, and I said, "You don't have to read. I know you can do it. You know, you can do it. You can do it." And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "No, you can do it. You'll have the part." And she said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Can I tell my mother?" I said, "Yeah, you can tell your mother."
In that scene with Adam, in his first scene, because you're opening your movie with someone in this sense who's never been there on the screen before.
Right.
Do you remember when you were shooting that? Was it a challenge for him and you, or was it?
It wasn't a challenge for him because, like I say, when he came in and auditioned, he did it.
But he didn't freeze within the, you know what I'm saying?
No. He never frees. I mean, what I try to do with the set, I mean, I'm an actor, you know, and so you want people to just feel comfortable. And I will say, and now it's even better now when you have, you know, things done digitally, you know, and there's no film. You're not wasting any film. It's like, you know, you just keep running the thing. And I say, you know, and they would always say, "Well, should we rehearse?" I said, what are we rehearsing for? What's the point of rehearsing? You know, we'll just shoot, and you know, if it's good, it's good. If it's not, we'll keep going and whatever.
And is this the style here too?
Yeah, I always did that. I mean, the nice thing is you can walk in like you finish a take, and then you don't stop the thing. You know, you just walk in, and say, "All right," and you're talking to them and then you just do another one, and so they're feeling relaxed. It's not like, "Okay, get ready, now it's time, action." You know. They're already comfortable. It's a nice playground, and and I want people to feel good because that's what I know I would, you know. And I never ask an actor to do something I couldn't do. You know, it's like if you're a coach of a team, you know, you don't want to say, "Okay, run down the court, stop at half court, and hit a jump shot." You know, nobody can do it. You know, but if you know I know I can do it, then I know they can do it.
You had, in terms of the way you shot, a number of scenes where you've got the 2 guys interviewing something. So you've got these 3 shots that are that come a lot in terms of your storytelling.
Yeah.
You also have chosen to oftentimes move that camera.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you've got multiple cameras or one, but
Yeah,
I
I always
noticed
had
that,
2 cameras.
And what was the either decision or process? So, you know, just the 2 of us, or 3 of us in those cases, the camera's moving a minute. Well, how did you?
Okay, so here's what's funny. First of all, I had 2 cameras all the time because you can't shoot something in 26 days unless you have more than 1 camera, although it takes too long. And the guy who shot it, Barry Markowitz, who shot the last 3 films I did, he also did the film with Jeff Bridges where he played the country star. Crazy Heart. He shot Crazy Heart. He also shot Sling Blade, and he's really good DP. But he also operates the second camera, and he has major ADD, and he can't sit still. I mean, he's Jewish, and so he's got spilkus, you know. And I'm always going back and forth, Barry, the camera, and he says, "Yeah, but he gets bored, you know." So he just keeps moving it. So and the other guy is a little bit more, you know, reserved and stuff. So you get a mixture of things. But he has a good instinct, you know. He has a good instinct. He doesn't usually, you know. But sometimes I say, "Barry, just keep the camera there because I need to see that there," you know. No.
Otherwise, you'd always look over.
But I'm bored. I'm bored. I want to go.
So you went with locations.
Yeah.
I thought that you had the president's, all the president's men. You built this fabulous room for the, and you did.
No, we got lucky because we shot down in New Orleans, and the Times-Picayune, which is the big paper there, they had moved to another building, and they left this place empty. It was completely empty. So we got to just dress it and make it look like, like the Night Ritter offices, but. We could never have built that. It's too expensive, you know. You don't have the budget.
And in recreating Afghanistan and Iraq?
Yeah, it's like I did this movie Bucket List years ago, and the Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman, they go to the pyramids, and they go to they jump out of a plane. They go everywhere. They're in Africa. They're on top of a mountain with the snow. We never left the parking lot in the. That place, the lot that's across the street from like the Formosa Cafe, we shot it all in this parking lot. You can, with CGI, you put everything in and you just build a little thing where they are and everything around it, So we did that, we had Afghanistan. It was a parking lot in New Orleans.
So in order to set those shots up, did you have someone storyboard this for you so you can know, okay, here are the shots we're going to need for this?
Yeah, a lot of times they like the storyboard. They said they will storyboard. I never use the storyboards though, because I'll look at them, but then I will just say, wait a minute, I know generally what they can cover. And what I'll do is, rather than storyboard, I'll work with the CGI guy, and I'll say, just tell me where I can shoot. Give me the angle. Just go me the areas that I can shoot and what you can do and put in. For instance, like when the transport, a caravan is moving, that was shot, in a place where there was a junkyard and there was like a lot of stuff we just painted out and you make it look like a desert. And he tells me, well, you can shoot 360. It's going to cost this much. As long as I know I can shoot 360, then I can put the camera anywhere. And we use drones. We had some drone shots for that.
And this is our last question because unfortunately we have to leave, but
that's okay.
What was the toughest scene for you as you reflect on this movie now?
The toughest, let's see. I don't know. I mean, they all seem to work okay. I mean, the hardest is shooting in D.C. because it's crowded now, and there's more security than there's ever been. After 9/11, there's been so much more security. It's hard to get streets, and get them cleared. But also, you're working with the Capitol Police, the federal government, and there are certain places you can go and everything, and that was difficult. You were allowed a certain amount of time. I remember when I did LBJ, we had to go to Dealey Plaza, and it took, they said, okay, you can have like 6 hours, and I had to recreate the whole Kennedy assassination in 6 hours. So that one I really did plan every single shot. I had 4 cameras and I moved around. But anything in D.C. is hard. It's hard.
One more question.
Yeah.
Speaking of D.C., what's Dick Cheney's response to the film so far?
I don't know, man. I don't know. But, I mean, he still stands by it and said it was still the right thing to do, But here's something interesting. We had a screening there in D.C., and General Shinseki, who was at the time, if you remember, he testified and said, if you're going to invade Iraq, you're going to need at least 300,000 to 400,000 troops to hold this place for a period of time. He turned out it was right, but he got fired for saying that because Wolfowitz was saying, we'll be in and out $2 billion, and the reconstruction will pay for itself, and all this ridiculous stuff. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, I started crying watching this thing. And the other guy was Lawrence Wilkerson, who was Colin Powell's chief of staff. And he watched this and he came up after me. He said it got me angry all over again because he knows that his boss was handed a bill of goods.
Well, thanks for getting us angry once more, and hopefully we'll act on it.
Vote. You got to vote. Got to get everybody out.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. If you'd like to hear more, you can find past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please like, share, and leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.